when was the day when Cryo Supremacy was still available? When was the time when Freeze Team Ayaka Ganyu DPS has always been a chosen whenever you are in the Abyss? While Cryo has been a little bit forgotten for the last few, I would say, years, pretty long, especially after Dendro release, right? Fontaine came, Cryo was nowhere to be seen. Natlin is here and we've almost completed Natlin, and Cryo is still forgotten. However, things might get a little bit spicier for our lovely Cryos whenever patch 5.6 arrives, because in 5.6 this is basically almost a guarantee that our lovely chef girl, you know, it's not officially confirmed how she's gonna look yet, but we kind of already know how beautiful she is going to be. Now her name is very interesting as well. From the look of it, it's going to be in French. Now, in order for me to not butcher this name, we're going to go into Google Translate and write out her name to make sure that nobody can tell me that I'm butchering her names, right? So if it's in French, this is how it's going to be listened.
Escoffier. Escoffier.
But if it's English, then yeah, it sounds like this.
Escoffier. Escoffier.
Now, since her name looks more to be French, I'm just going to go with the French pronunciation, which is Escoffier, not Escoffier, which is sounds like coffee. All right. Marissa and Ian-san is basically going to be on the first phase, which many of us are excited. So if you're planning to swipe for pooling, then don't forget to check out Loot Bar. If you know me, I've been recommending you guys Loot Bar before, since you can always save almost a 23% on all of your top-ups, with over 100,000 orders and so many good reviews at this point. And by the way, this also applies to PS5 and Xbox user who can place orders through Loot Bar. You can be sure that Loot Bar is trustworthy. Here you can see my order receipts of all of my top-ups that I have done. So guys, be sure to check out Loot Bar through the link in my description, as it can be a great way for you to save your money, especially if you are topping up a large amount. And that's enough for the name right now, but in today's video we're going to be looking a bit into Escoffier in terms of her basic skills and kit that she's potentially going to have, and then my thoughts process into a character that's like this at the current point, because I am very much excited for this character if it does happen to be true. Now obviously this is not official information, so I really have to put a disclaimer out there. All the information that we discuss in this video are primed to change upon official release, so we're just, you know, looking into it and putting a bit of our reaction for the current beta of the information. Alright, so for Escoffier skills and kit, she is basically going to be a Cryo character, 5-star obviously, but interestingly she uses the POA. Ascension stat is going to be crit rate, which is yes, as long as it's crit ratio, I'm happy with it. So we're not going to be using her normal attack too much, because her kit focuses a lot more into her E skill and elemental burst. For E skill, it's rather simple as well. You just basically either tap or hold, and then she will spawn like a cooking mac onto the field with your active character to do off-field cryo damage, which can be nice because looking at it, her scaling is rather decent. So from the look of the crit rate ascension that she's going to have, we're going to be expecting that she's going to be a character that can deal damage off field alongside with, you know, cryo applications and potentially helping your team with other stuff as well. Elemental burst is also pretty simple. If you're looking at a talent level 10, she's having 1,000 scaling for her burst.
I mean, it's alright, like.
And on top of that, she is going to be healing all of your party, which is really great because team-wide healing is something that I would love onto my supportive character. Not to mention that she's more toward as a sub DPS potential, plus healing, and not to mention when we're touching on her passive talent, Inspiration Immerse Seasoning. Whenever your party has either 1, 2, 3, or 4 Hydro or Cryo characters, Escoffier will decrease the Hydro and Cryo resistance of the opponent she hit by either her skill or her burst by either 5, 10, 15, or a whopping 55% resistance rate.
Damn!
Holy damn. Okay. What is Soja's cooking here, right? She's literally a cook. So we can expect that she's going to be cooking up some spicy stuff. It is so spicy that you're probably going to get some frostburn. So this is looking really great. And obviously the whole point of her kit is mostly going to be surrounding this, right? 55% resistant shred is definitely nothing to be looking at. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to achieve it on most of the character that we have available in the whole entire game, unless they are supported with either Constellations or other means of resistant shred. But what's more interesting about this passive is that it is not locked within a Hydro and a Cryo team, because they just mentioned that when the party has this number of elemental characters, so it's more similar to how Linny's passive work, where, you know, the more pyro character that he has on his specific teams, the more damage he's going to be able to do. But while Linny is more focusing to work on a mono pyro team, Escoffier can specifically focuses on either a total mono cryo teams if you really want to go for it, or a freeze team if you like. But other than that, she can go toward either a melt team comms or even a mixture of hydro, cryo and pyro team, which will be interesting in terms of whenever we look into more of a team comms in later videos. So this is definitely something that I'm very excited about for this character, because it's going to be able to change how cryo is played quite a lot. Cryo hasn't have a lot of buff, especially freeze. I myself is someone who love freeze because it feels to be an interesting mechanic to freeze your enemies that doesn't really move a lot, right? It's been one of the best teams for Ayaka Enjoyer, because if you miss your elemental burst, Ayaka is basically cooked, right? So Ayaka has been used in the freeze team quite a lot. If we have Escoffier on the Ayaka team later on, oh my god, Ayaka is probably going to be coming back with this number. Hopefully they don't nerf it. I just want it to be buffed so that freeze team is even more available at the current point. Other than that, her other passive talent allows her to basically restore your active character at interval for 9 seconds, right? So she has access to pretty decent healing from her elemental burst scaling if we're looking at it. And then other than that, your current active character is also getting healed. So she is going to be a specific healer on your team, making her kit very viable from the look of it at the current point. You also have a third passive talent, but it's more toward like a fun cooking mechanic that Escoffier had access to at the current point. Now looking into her constellation, because it's also interesting, her C1, if it stays the same when she is officially released, this C1 is probably going to be one of the best constellation if you are using in specifically the right conditions. Now I say that because with her C1 you are now more stuck toward a either freeze team or a mono cryo team, because at that point all your party members who are cryo will have the crit damage increased by a 60%, and that is absolutely massive. Now I did mention before that it has to be in the right condition for it to be one of the best C1 out there, but when you're using Escoffier, most of the time you're either going to have her in the freeze team or the mono cryo team anyway. So this C1 is absolutely good. It might even better for me to look into getting her C1 more than her weapon, because Escoffier does have access to a pretty decent number of weapons, while her constellation is looking to get pretty spicy. Her C2 basically adds extra damage to your cryo character attack based on 240% of Escoffier's attack. Now it does limit you to a 5 stack, so technically speaking a 5 cryo damage instances, where it's pretty similar to Shenhe's quo. So it's basically just going to be an increase for 5 cryo instances of damage. However, since the damage increase is pretty huge, this is still a very strong constellation if you do have access to it. Now C3 and C5 is okay. Now what's that just basically allows you to get more damage from her elemental skill and burst, and on top of that more healing for her as well. So it's a decent constellation. Her C4 basically focuses more on her healing. So basically her passive healing state, which is called Rehab Diet, now lasts for 6 more seconds, which means a 15 second in total. Other than that, now it has the ability to have chances of healing an extra 100% while restoring 2 energy to Escoffier, and it can trigger this up to a 7 times. How this trigger is dependent on her crit rate, which is interesting. So most of the time you should be able to get this extra healing stuff going on, because I would assume that you're going to build her quite a decent number of crit rate for your damage capability on her. Therefore, it should be pretty easy. And her C6 is where this is getting a little bit nuts. For whenever your active character hits either normal charge or plunging, Escoffier will fire off an additional special grade frozen parfait that deals 350% of her own attack as AoE cryo damage. And this can be dealt up to a 6 times. Now we multiply that by 6, that's basically a 2100% of her attack, which is, yes, it is pretty nuts. And it's also considered to be an element of skill damage, which is interesting. Now obviously this is safe for C6 Wolos, which many of us are not going to be having access to most of the time. So for the majority of the players, we're more going to be focused on her C1 and C2, especially toward her C1, because that is shaping up to be pretty decent. Which leads us to a question of how her signature is going to be doing. Now signature is basically a crit damaging weapon, so yes, it's more going to be a confirmation that she's going to be able to deal you pretty nice off-field damage. What it does is that it increases her attack by 12%, and when she's off-field, she get another 12% increase, which is basically a 24%. And then other than that, whenever she triggers healing, herself and the active character will get an extra 32% increase for a 3-second. Now, you know, she does have constant healing, so technically speaking, you're always going to be getting this buff as well. From the look of it, her weapon is also pretty nice, especially when we're giving it on her. Not only does give her a pretty decent number of crit damage, but you're also going to be able to have extra attack increase onto her own, as most of the stuff that she does scales with her own attack percentage. So both C1 and her signature will be tempting, but obviously if you already have other good weapon options, then C1 may be a bit more worthwhile for you. Now I'm not going to be going too in depth into artifacts and weapons in this specific video. This is more of a video where we look into her skills and kit. Moving on, when we look into her potential teams, I think most of the time it's rather going to be easy if we look into a mono or a freeze team. But from the look of it, one of the best team for Escoffier at this point in time is going to be a DPS character, which is either going to be a Ayaka, Ganyu, or Risley. Most of the time I feel that Ayaka and Ganyu, especially Ayaka, will be more beneficial to a freeze team. And then up next we have obviously an Escoffier, which is a sub DPS support and a healer for your team, right? So that's going to be a 50% resistant shred for your Hydro and Cryo character. Up next we have our off-field Hydro character, our lovely Farina, which is where we're going to be having a freeze comp for us. I'd say that most of the time Farina should have enough Hydro application to freeze the majority of your enemies anyway. So Farina Hydro application should be able to be enough in a freeze team, not to mention the amount of damage buff that Farina has access to and her off-field damage. And now Escoffier is going to be giving Hydro resistance shred to Farina. And then last slot, we're going to have Shanha, the one of the best cryo buffer that we've got in the whole entire game up until this point. So you're having basically a 3 cryo character with only 1 Hydro, which is technically fine as we're using them in a freeze team. But from the look of it, every supportive character has access to really good damaging increase, not to mention you're technically having a 2 sub DPS character on this specific team to support Ayaka whenever she's doing damage, or Ganyu whenever they are doing damage, which is absolutely bonkers if we think about it. I am very excited for this specific team. I've already mentioned I love freeze team. If this is going to be one of the case, then maybe I'm just going to go ahead and invest quite a lot into our lovely chef girl at this point. Other than that, we do have a mono cryo teams where, you know, again, if you have a main DPS, you're going to be having Escoffier and a Shenhe. And other than that, we do have options like Diona, Layla, some other cryo options. But obviously, I don't think and expect you to be using a mono cryo team anytime soon, because yeah, you're having a little bit way too many cryo characters, and I think most of you should already have a Farina at this point. So it's more better off just give a Farina or even another Hydro character to have a freeze team at this point. Freeze team used to be pretty bad, but as long as you have Escoffier here, character and you're using in a freeze team, it's technically going to be better off than you doing a mono cryo team where enemies can still move around anyway. Those are the very invested teams. If you're a more free-to-player friendly and you're looking into teams with no 5-star, then for main cryo DPS, you can have like a Cryo or Rosaria. Those 4-star DPS character are still pretty decent. Then you have your Escoffier. Then other than that, Hydro Applicator is going to be Xingqiu. And then another cryo supportive character can be like either Diona, Layla, or Charlotte for more healing, which I don't think that we actually need. So Diona or Layla should technically be fine. And then as I've mentioned before, there can be a Meltcom or a mixture of 3 elements of Hydro, Pyro, and Cryo. But I'm going to spend a little bit more time cooking up these kind of teams to see how much potential they're going to be having. And then we're going to have another video talking more toward her teams, which is something I love doing about Genshin characters. And that's going to be really fun. So from the look of it, Escoffier skill and kit are looking to be pretty promising if she stays the same whenever she is released. Hopefully she will stay the same because I have been begging for Cryo update and Cryo buff for quite a long time, since Cryo is one of my favorite elements in the entire game. Because with this, we're going to have a pretty nice freeze team that we're going to be able to play around with. Not to mention, Cryo characters are back to be more viable. Obviously, we still have to wait for more information about whether she's going to get changes or not, but if you're deciding to whether or not you pull for her, basically it's more toward whether you like freeze team or Cryo characters a lot, because again, Escoffier will most likely going to be used on a freeze and a mono cryo team. So I think that's everything I have to discuss about her potential at this point in time. I hope that you guys enjoyed the videos. If you're new to the channel, guys, don't forget to subscribe to not miss out on my future Genshin Impact videos. If you have any questions or discussion, leave it down in the comment section and I or some other lovely Genshin player will get to you there. I really appreciate you guys staying with me to this part of the video, guys, and with that I wish you a super day and I'll catch you on my next video.